The Speaker.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen, amen, namaste.
Oath or affirmation, announcements by the Speaker.
Honourable members, the Honourable Maxi Cuffy MP, member for La Hoketa Talparo, has asked to be excused from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the member seeks is granted.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers.
The Minister of Social Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay a green paper on the draft national parenting policy of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
The Leader of the House.
Sorry, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government to the fourth report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee on the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheet, and other financial statements of the Community-Based Environmental Protection and Enhancement Program for the financial years 2009 to 2014. Papers 3 and 4, the responses to the seventh report of the Public Accounts Committee on the examination of the report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial years 2014 and 2015 with specific reference to the Ministry of Education. These responses are from the Service Commissions Department and the Personnel Department. Paper 5, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Finance to the seventh report of the Public Accounts Committee on the examination of the report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial years 2014 and 2015, with specific reference to the Ministry of Education. Paper 6, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Finance to the seventh report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee on the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheet, and other financial statements of the Estate Management and Business Development Company Limited for the financial years 2008 to 2010. 7, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Public Utilities to the sixth report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee on the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheet, and other financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago Solid Waste Management Company Limited for the financial years 2008 to 2013. Paper 17, the ministerial response of the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs to the eighth report of the Public Accounts Committee on an examination of the report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on a special audit of the Public Transport Service Corporation. Papers 18 to 19, the ministerial responses to the ninth report of the Public Accounts Committee on the examination of the report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial years 2014 and 2015, with specific reference to the Ministry of Health. These responses, Madam Speaker, are from the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Public Administration and Communications. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
Minister of Finance.
Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay on the table the report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Miaro Civic Center for the year ended September 30th, 2015, the report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Miaro Rio Claro Regional Corporation Chairman's Fund for the years ended September 30th, 2013 to 2016, the report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Eastern Regional Health Authority for the years ended September 30th, 2014 and 2015, and the guidelines on the implementation of the Tax Information Exchange Agreements, United States of America, Act 2017. I beg to move that papers 8 to 14 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee.
Honorable members, the question is that papers 8 to 14 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The member for Toku, Sandy Grandi.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the delegation report on the 42nd Conference of the Caribbean and Americas and the Atlantic region of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association held in Bastia, St. Kitts and Nevis from June 16th to 24th, 2017.
Reports from committees.
The member for Faisabad.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to present 1, the 4th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on an examination of the system of internal audit within the public service. 2, the 5th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on an examination into the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development with specific reference to accountability and transparency, inventory control, internal audit, subhead 02, goods and services, subhead 03, minor equipment purchases, subhead 09, development program, consolidated fund, and infrastructure development fund.
Member for Digo Martin, Northeast.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have the honor to present the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Gambling, Gaming, and Betting Control Bill 2016.
The member for San Fernando West.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to present the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Cybercrime Bill 2017.
Prime Minister's questions.
Member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Are there any plans for citizens, particularly women, to be allowed to carry tasers and pepper spray as a measure of personal protection in light of 40 women being murdered for the year already?
Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. In light of the request for this particular non-lethal response to criminals, the Commissioner of Police is actively considering the use of these non-lethal weapons for citizens, women, and particularly the security services.
Member for Tabaki.
Prime Minister, has the Commissioner of Police indicated how long he's going to continue to take to make a decision in the interest of women who continue to be brutally murdered in this country?
Prime Minister.
I do not know of any specific date, but I do know that the Commissioner is giving it active consideration, and we anticipate a decision in the not-too-distant future.
Member for Couva North.
does the Prime Minister have any intention to negotiate with the banking sector on behalf of the Tobago Hoteliers Association so that properties are not lost to repay debts due to the steep decline in the Tobago tourism sector?
There are not very many opportunities to create negotiations with the private sector banking community. However, the government has appealed to the private sector in general to be understanding of circumstances of this nature, and also that there are certain kinds of relief that the government is considering at its end to bring about some relief to those persons who are so affected. However, there are some instances which might be beyond any kind of intervention that the government or the banking sector can respond to.
Member for Barataria Sanwan.
Mr. On a supplemental question, could you give us the status of the $250 million grant that a previous budget had given to the hoteliers in Tobago?
Prime Minister.
I don't think it's a grant system. I know it's a guarantee system. That guarantee system is and I don't know if the quantum is as that. I think we looked at it a few weeks ago, and it's about 60 million. However, what happens is that there is some support from that system, but it's not being utilized as was anticipated, because a large number of the applicants do not initially qualify as bankable projects. The way that system works is as if there's a bankable project, the entrepreneur gets the government as a guarantor, and the bank provides the money to the business, and the bank that provides that money has the government guaranteeing the funds. But first and foremost, the projects have to be bankable, and they have to apply to tourism. Recently, when we looked at how it was functioning, we discovered that the majority of applications that went to the bank were unsuccessful on the basis that the projects themselves were not bankable. So there was nothing for the government to guarantee. However, we intend to review it and to encourage greater use of that facility, because it has the potential to provide this financial support for those who are successful with bankable projects.
Member for Naparima.
Prime Minister, considering the recent ferry fiasco involving the Ocean Floor 2 and Cabo Star, could the Prime Minister elaborate on the information available to him which prompted his suggestion that the procurement of the Ocean Floor 2 deal was crooked?
Madam Speaker, as you might be aware, I have been summoned to appear before the Joint Select Committee that is investigating this matter. I have agreed to attend, and I would prefer to make my comments at that venue on that occasion.
Member for Oropuch West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the Prime Minister indicate whether a government senator is a shareholder and or director of A&V Oil and Gas Limited?
Madam Speaker, I do not have that information, and I have no such knowledge.
Oropuch East.
Thank you very much. Would the Prime Minister agree that if a government senator is indeed a shareholder of this company, would be in receipt of dividends from monies paid by Petrotrin for what is now alleged to be fraudulent arrangements?
Madam Speaker, I am not in a position to speculate on this matter, and I would rather not, in answering questions in Parliament, engage in speculation.
Member for Oropuch East.
In light of the Prime Minister's statement to the press at the post-cabinet press briefing, would the Prime Minister indicate the qualifications of this person to be a senator in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago?
As a member of the House of long standing, I am sure that the member for Oropuch East would know that the qualification to be a senator is written in the Constitution.
Member for Oropuch West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the Prime Minister indicate how often he has been a guest at the private residence of the owners of the A&V Oil Gas Limited?
Prime Minister.
In the last 7 years, I've been to the home of the Bash family about 5 or 6 times, which is a whole lot less than the number of times spent by the last Prime Minister in Gopal House.
Member for Oropuchis. Order. Order.
Would the price...
Order. Member for Oropuchis.
East. Would the Prime... Would the Prime Minister agree that his telephone call and/or conversation with Mr. Bash has prejudiced any further investigation and compromised an investigation by Petrotrin, by the police and the DPP?
I will allow that as a supplemental question. Member for Oropuchis.
Would the Prime Minister agree that his conversation with his friend on this matter could be also the subject of an investigation by the relevant law enforcement agencies?
Again, I will not allow that as a supplemental. Member for Oropuch West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the Prime Minister indicate if Mr. Vidya Devkising, who was named in the Petrotrin Internal Audit Report, continues to be a member of the Board of Directors of Lake Asphalt?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Devkising has been a member of the Lake Asphalt Board since December 2015, and given the fact that he is now implicated in this investigation, my information is that he intends to resign from the board, and I expect that resignation to come in short order.
Member for Oropuchis.
In light of that statement and investigations, could the Prime Minister indicate, having said that he spoke to his friend while abroad, could you indicate whether you took the opportunity to contact the Minister of Energy, who is on record as saying he could not contact you, or you contacted the chairman of Petrotrin and or the president of Petrotrin, in addition to your good friend?
I won't allow that as a supplemental question. Member for Oropuchis.
Ask the Honorable Prime Minister if he's aware that Mr. Bash traveled one day before him to the United States and returned a day before him to Trinidad and Tobago.
I won't allow that as a supplemental question. Member for Oropuch West.
Taste of San Francisco Pinal.
Could the Prime Minister indicate whether the government, through any state bodies and or the ministries, caused to be issued irrevocable letters of credit to Bridgman Services Group pursuant to securing the Cabo Star and the Ocean Flower 2 vessels for the Sea Bridge?
Speaker, a letter of credit was extended to the Port Authority by First Citizens Bank for the Ocean Flower 2. A letter of credit was also extended by the Port Authority by Republic Bank for the Cabo Star.
Member for Oropuch East, supplemental.
Could the Prime Minister indicate the circumstances of that arrangement in light of the cancellation of the Ocean Flower 2 and by the fact that it is an irrevocable letter of credit?
Madam Speaker, those statements are not correct in that the letter of credit is meant to provide security for the action in terms of the establishment charter party. The letter of credit with respect to the Ocean Flower, once the contract was terminated by the Port Authority for reasons given and it's in the public domain, the Port Authority then would have instructed FCB Port of Spain and not to pay, and therefore the owners of the Ocean Flower cannot collect on the letter of credit because the contract has been properly terminated. So that assumption made by the member for Oropuch East is misleading and incorrect.
Member for Oropuch East.
Could the Prime Minister explain the circumstances why a private provider of a vessel for service needs credit from the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago?
Madam Speaker, clearly the member for Oropuch East has no idea what a letter of credit is.
Between the time that the letter of credit was issued and the contract was terminated, has the port or did the port incur any kinds of expenses relative to that period of time with the arrangement with Ocean Flower and Bridgman's?
The statement coming from the chairman of the port in response to this particular question, which was done in the public domain, was that there was no monies paid to the principals of the Ocean Flower with respect to its response to the action of becoming a ferry service in Trinidad and Tobago.
Member for Caroni Central.
Madam Speaker. Prime Minister, given that a recent poll published in a daily newspaper indicated that 83% of the population think that the government is taking Trinidad and Tobago in the wrong direction, is the Prime Minister willing to consider changing course or redirecting government action?
Madam Speaker, unfortunately, unlike my friend from Caroni Central, I have not read or studied the poll, and I do not believe that 83% of this country think that the country is going in the wrong direction.
Member for Caroni.
Prime Minister, they're obviously in a response like that to a poll. I'm going to ask the question at the end of... Madam Speaker, may I have your protection?
Members, order please, order. 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 I wish to caution both sides on courtesy and parliamentary decorum. Member for Caroni Central, please proceed.
Prime Minister, as you know, a poll represents the opinions of people as expressed to the pollster.
Okay.
On the basis of that...
Is this the question, member? Member?
I'm asking the question.
I know, but remember, just really in terms of you have 15 seconds to ask it, so we don't want the précis. If you can just go directly to the question, please.
Prime Minister, do you think that your government is taking the country in the right direction?
The answer is yes.
Member for Caroni Central.
Could I then ask if you have any intention of taking the opinion of people into account?
And it is precisely because we have intentions like that why I, as Prime Minister, go out and talk to people on a frequent basis to hear what they have to say.
Member for Barataria Sanon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Prime Minister, 6 months ago, you announced that Ramesh Lawrence Morat, Senior Counsel, was hired to advise the Attorney General on the resumption of hangings for those convicted of murder. Can the Prime Minister please advise this nation on the status of this matter, and when can we expect this to produce actionable results?
Advice has been obtained from Mr. Ramesh Lawrence Morat and has been forwarded to the Attorney General. A desk has been established at the Attorney General and Legal Affairs Office to advance movement of cases through all stages so as to avoid the Pratt & Morgan situation. Regrettably, nothing like this was done during the period 2010 to 2015, and most of the cases on death row would have been influenced by this inaction of that period where the Pratt & Morgan effects have already taken place.
Member for Barataria Sanon.
So, the last part of the question, Prime Minister, says when do you expect it to produce actionable results? When do we expect to see something happening?
Prime Minister.
How soon?
Well, what is happening is that the desk is pursuing, ensuring that as matters come up in the court, they are dealt with in such a way that you get the best movement through the court. And until the matter is concluded in the court, you can't attach a date as to when a particular action will take place. Okay?
Member for Point of Pierre, supplemental.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Honourable Prime Minister, could the supplemental, could the Prime Minister state what was the cost of these advisory services?
Prime Minister.
I am not aware that there's any cost. This was a pro bono contribution, as far as I'm aware.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the Prime Minister inform this House if a company named A&V Oil and Gas Limited bid for a 3-year contract to replace the Superfast Galicia?
Madam Speaker, I don't have that information with me, and I'm sure if that question is put to the minister or the port, you'll get an extensive answer and a very accurate one. I don't want to speculate on that.
Member for Urupuch East.
Is the Prime Minister saying that the Prime Minister took no effort to get an answer for this question in light of his responsibility as Prime Minister during Prime Minister's question?
Not going to allow that question. Member for Naparima.
It was the same question, Madam Speaker.
Member for Couva South.
Could the Prime Minister inform this House when will the report of the sole investigator, Mr. Christian Mute, into the circumstances surrounding the procurement of the Cabo Star and the Ocean Flower 2 and entering into the charter party agreement for these vessels be completed?
Madam Speaker, I requested this report from Mr. Mute by letter of appointment dated August 15, 2017, as a sole investigator to report within 30 days. I'm pleased to announce that a report has been submitted to me last night, and that report is now to be read and be made available to the Joint Select Committee for its assistance.
Member for Couva South, supplemental.
Given what the Prime Minister has just indicated, Madam Speaker, will the Prime Minister lay the said report in this August chamber?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I have just said, and I hope it satisfies the eagerness of the member, the report is in my possession. I will read it over the weekend and make it available to the committee that is sitting specifically on this matter. And I trust that that will meet the needs of the House.
Member for Shogunas West.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Prime Minister. Could the Prime Minister indicate whether or not the Chief Secretary of the THA and members of the executive of the THA avail themselves to the sole investigator, Christian Mute?
Prime Minister.
I am not aware that he requested their presence or availability, and I do not know whether they did in fact comply. That was not part of the investigator was free to speak to whoever he wished, and I am not sure if the THA was one of those bodies.
Member for Shogunas West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Prime Minister, in view of your instructions that there should be full cooperation with JSC, how do you view the non-compliance of the Chief Secretary of the THA and members of the executive, but ignoring the request of the JSC at their meeting in Tobago?
I will not allow that as a supplemental question. Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In light of the delivery of the report of the 7-member committee headed by Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Energy and Energy Affairs, Mr. Selwyn Lashley, to the Cabinet on the 6th of June 2017 to restructure Petrotrin, could the Prime Minister inform this House as to the recommendations contained in the said report for the restructuring of same?
Madam Speaker, it is the intention of the government to make that report available to the Standing Committee of Energy in the House, and that will be done in a matter of a few days, and on that occasion, a comprehensive summary of the report would be read to this House to satisfy this question in terms of what the report contains.
Member for Couva South.
Madam Speaker, just on a point of clarification, is the Prime Minister going to lay a full report in this said House?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, again, I can't lay any fuller report than the report of the committee. I just said that it is the intention of the government in the next few days to lay the committee's report in this House, and on that occasion, a summary of the report will be read out in this House.
Member for Urupuch East. Member for Karen East.
Would the Honourable Prime Minister indicate whether the restructuring exercise includes the restructuring of the massive financial debt that Petrotrin owes, close to about $14 billion?
That is a major consideration in any restructuring of Petrotrin, but so large is that concern and the assignment that that matter is really now being dealt with by the Minister of Finance, since Petrotrin's inability, let me rephrase that, since Petrotrin has put to the Minister of Finance its inability to service that debt, so that debt has now become a matter for the Minister of Finance more so than Petrotrin.
Prime Minister, in light of the appointment of Mr. Lashley to the board of Petrotrin, does the Prime Minister consider it to be good governance to have the head accounting officer and administrative head of the Ministry of Energy as a member of the board of directors of a state enterprises under the aegis of the said ministry?
Madam Speaker, I noticed that this particular subject has been exercising some thought, but it is not the first time that's happened in this country. And secondly, given the nature of the assignment that is responsible for bringing Petrotrin into some sustainable operation, and given the requirement for Petrotrin's business to be handled by the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Energy, the presence of the Permanent Secretary on the board would be a great advantage and not a disadvantage.
For Caroni East.
When the board makes the recommendations and there are issues of accountability, and the Permanent Secretary is the person accountable in the Ministry of Energy, who would they account to when the recommendations of lack of accountability or any accountability process?
There's a body called the Corporation Soul, and I must tell you that the Permanent Secretary is not a member of the operations of Petrotrin, and is not a part of the company of Petrotrin.
Member for Couva South. Member for Couva North, question 13, sir.
Could the Prime Minister indicate when the campaign financing legislation will reach the Parliament in light of the contractor in the fake oil scandal being linked to the PNM as a party financer?
Madam Speaker, I'm very delighted to see the energy of the opposition with respect to this whole question of campaign finance. Because, Madam Speaker, the government coming out of the opposition, the PNM, has continuously been advocating for this kind of enthusiasm. And the member for Couva North would have noticed that in my meeting with the member for Siparia a few weeks ago, one of the matters that was put on the table by the Prime Minister, myself, was this matter of campaign finance. And the government is actively preparing to engage all political entities and the public on this matter with a view to having campaign finance reform legislation enacted before the next general election. And I trust that this enthusiasm on the opposition side will reflect itself in cooperation so that we can have proper campaign finance legislation in Trinidad and Tobago.
Member for Old East.
In light of this scandal, could the Prime Minister indicate, as he spoke yesterday, what further investigation he's contemplating outside of the DPP and the police on the fake oil scandal?
Member, I will not allow that as a supplemental question.
Questions.
Member for Miaro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Honourable Minister of Education, having regard to the shutdown of the Rio Claro East Secondary School by the Public Health Department for a faulty sewer system and the AFCL's inability to effectively deal with the issue, what is the ministry doing to urgently address this situation?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, the contractor is presently on site at the Rio Claro East Secondary School, and the work has commenced. It is expected that the works will be completed over the weekend, 15th of September 2017. Works are being implemented by way of 2 crews to ensure timely completion. Thank you.
Member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the Minister inform this House how soon can schools secure their 10% textbook top-up for the new school term?
Before I call on the Minister of Education, can I ask members to please observe Standing Order 53 with respect to members listening in silence? Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. During the period May 15 to June 21st, 2017, the Ministry of Education conducted an inventory audit exercise of existing textbooks in primary and secondary schools to facilitate the redistribution of usable textbooks to identified schools. The audit revealed that approximately 8% of all textbooks across all primary and secondary schools are to be replaced. As a result, Cabinet approved the top-up of 8% of textbooks in the school. The Ministry of Education has prepared the required textbook manifest for procurement, and we await the availability of funds. Thank you.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Education, could the Minister inform this House how much money is owed to student nurses within the public health system, and how soon will the payment be made to the said student nurses?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, the information that is before us would tell us that COSTAT is owed $1.5 million. The School of Nursing and Midwifery is owed nil, but there is some concern with respect to the money that is owed to the University of the Southern Caribbean. Madam Speaker, the University of the Southern Caribbean is a private institution. There was an arrangement between the University of the Southern Caribbean and COSTAT, which ended in October 2016. As a result, this ministry, the Ministry of Education, is looking into this matter to decide whether we are indebted to this University of the Southern Caribbean. Thank you.
Member for Couva South.
Madam Speaker, so the Minister is telling this House that he does not know when the student nurses will be paid their stipend.
Is that a question, Member?
Yes.
Member, could you phrase the question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am asking the Minister of Education again to advise this House, when will the student nurses be paid their stipend? A very simple question.
I believe that question was answered already. Member for Chaguanas East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the Honourable Minister indicate how many students we are talking about with respect to the indebtedness of student nurses at USC or through COSTAT?
Madam Speaker, at this time, I don't have that information available to me. This is a new question. Thank you.
Member for Carinese.
Bearing in mind students at USC, what would be the students who are enrolled at USC now, what would be their plight while you continue to investigate the matter?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, we are sympathetic to the plight of the students of the University of the Southern Caribbean. However, we have to ensure that what we do is in keeping with the way we spend government's money. This is a private institution, and before we can disburse funds, we must ensure that we do the proper thing. Thank you.
Member for Naparima.
The Minister of Energy and Energy Industries. In the light of the recent fake oil scandal, can the Minister say what foolproof systems are in place to ensure that the daily oil production figures provided to the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries and by extension the Ministry of Finance by various oil companies, including Petrotrin, are a true reflection of what is actually produced?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, under the Petroleum Act and regulations, the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries has regulatory and oversight authority of the energy sector, which includes both oil and gas. With regards to the measurement and veracity of crude oil measurements, it falls into two types. The first is crude oil exported, which is largely Galeota's production coming out of BP's condensate production, Perenco, and BHP. And there's a very robust system in place for measurement and shipment, which is all supervised by the Ministry of Energy. All other crudes eventually end up at the point-of-care refinery through a series of steps that comes from the individual tank farms of the field into three major bulk storage areas.
One is in Bernstein Forest Reserve, which is for the Western District. One is at Trinma, which takes Trinma crude. And one is in Barrackpore, which takes what is called Eastern District crude. The Ministry of Energy is not directly, doesn't have a direct role in the daily production report. And production reporting is twofold. One, which is bulk production, and second, which is well test production, because all the wells cumulatively make up the bulk. The system that is currently in place, a lot of it is very antiquated technology. It deals with physical measurements by gauges. And what this whole issue has shown is that the whole system needs some modernization, especially with regards bulk tanks and fiscalization point. The Ministry of Energy also has a very big role to play. All tanks, before it comes into service, must be calibrated by the Ministry of Energy to make sure that the volumes are valid. So what we will want to propose ultimately is that more accent is now to be placed on what is called the LAC units and flow meter technology that has a digital recording of all the flows and all the measurement for posterity, and it doesn't fall solely under the influence of a single individual.
Member for Naprima.
So the minister is saying that he cannot give 100% foolproof assurance that the figures presented are in fact correct, given what has taken place at Petrotrin.
No system in the world is 100% foolproof. Okay, there will be constraints. As a matter of fact, in the Petrotrin system, a variance of 0.5% of shipment to receipt is acceptable because that normalizes itself through time. Okay, so foolproof is the wrong word to use, but we need a more reliable system at the end of the day.
Member for Caroni Central.
Minister, Mr. Vidya Devki Singh, who allegedly verified the numbers for A&V Oil and Gas, does he verify the numbers for other companies or only this one company at Petrotrin?
A supplemental question. Member for Oropouche East.
Could I ask the Honourable Minister, in the aftermath of the startling revelation of the Leader of the Opposition and the response by Petrotrin, did you, Honourable Minister, make any effort to contact the Prime Minister to brief him on this matter?
We're not allowed that as a supplemental question. Member for Pointe-à-Pierre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Energy and Energy Industry, supplemental. Sometime in question, would the Petrotrin, based on a May statement this year that the production, oil production was on a boost, a high production, not given this fake oil standard, would Petrotrin now be given a revised statement of what is the actual production of oil?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industry.
The audit report has not been completed, so if any adjustment has to be made, I cannot prejudge that situation. As I said in the Senate yesterday, let due process take its course.
Questions on notice? Questions for oral answer?
Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are 9 questions for oral answer. We'll be answering all 9 questions. There's 1 question for written answer, Madam Speaker. That was prepared last week. It was ready last week, and it has been distributed. So we'll be answering all questions.
Member for Hoover North.
Speaker, question number 187 to the Minister of Works and Transport.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in addressing the traffic problems along the Old Southern Main Road, Chase Village, the Ministry of Works and Transport has completed the designs for a proposed roundabout at Chase Village Triangle at the intersection of the Chase Village Interchange, Connector Road, and the Southern Main Road, Couva. The designs took into consideration the congestion of an urban double-lane roundabout, road widening, and rehabilitation along the approach legs of the roundabout, extension and rehabilitation of the existing culverts, crossings, and drain channels in the vicinity of this project, and improvements to the pedestrian accessibility and safety along the roadway. During this process, the Ministry liaised with the major stakeholders to obtain the necessary approvals and plans. Construction will start in fiscal 2018-2019, subject to the availability of funding. Thank you.
Member for Couva North.
Thank you. Question number 188 to the Minister of Works and Transport.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Works and Transport, prior to the rainy season and on an ongoing basis, continue to provide major cleaning and rehabilitation of rivers and watercourses, maintenance and the existing drainage infrastructure and projects aimed at improving the channel's flow to alleviate any potential flooding and health hazard. At present, there are 118 projects which have been executed by the ministry throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Some have been completed and some are ongoing. Thank you.
Member for Naparima.
Thank you. Could the Minister indicate to the Honourable House, this Honourable House, what are the specific plans he has in respect of the Williamsville area that is subject to perennial flooding?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this point in time, what I have in front of me is 118 projects. I cannot tell you exactly where the 118 projects are, but I will facilitate the response in writing. Thank you.
Member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 192 to the Minister of Works and Transport.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, the management of the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago has no policy in respect to reimbursement to farmers for loss of livestock. These animals are not kept at the ports, and management have made every effort to ensure priority is given via advance booking for the transportation of animals on the cargo vessels. Thank you.
Member for Oropouche West.
Madam Speaker, question 194 to the Minister of Health.
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm grateful to my colleague for the question. Currently, the services of one pathologist are available at the Scarborough General Hospital. The services of one of the expected 3 graduates of pathology is now available, and the services of the other 2 are expected within fiscal year 2018. It is envisaged that these additional persons will improve the service and patient experience across the country. As a medium and long-term strategy, the Ministry of Health identified pathology as a major priority area and specialty for training and development to be undertaken by the Ministry of Education via the Scholarships and Advanced Training Division. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question 198 to the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Marine Resources.
And Fisheries. Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam Speaker, the National Agricultural Marketing and Development Corporation, NAMDEVCO, is in the process of conducting an audit into several projects, including the packing house at Brecon Castle. This audit is to identify the cost of works to date and whether NAMDEVCO has received value for money. At the same time, at the request of NAMDEVCO, the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries has engaged the Urban Development Corporation of Trinidad and Tobago, UDCOT, to prepare a request for proposals to explore the possibility of partnering with the private sector to bring the Brecon Castle packing house to operation. Based on the outcome of the request for proposal process, the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries would make appropriate recommendations to the Cabinet on the operationalization of the Brecon Castle packing house. We expect to be in a position to make such a decision, Madam Speaker, by the end of December 2017. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Based on what the Minister has just outlined in terms of this request for proposals from a public-private partnership point of view, does this mean that the stakeholders that will use the Brecon Castle packaging house now be subjected to some kind of fee structure?
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam Speaker, the government does not intend to impose onerous charges on the stakeholders for the use of the facility. It is intended to make it easier for agro-processors and other value-added processors in the agriculture sector. It is difficult at this stage to determine what fee structure would be implemented, but of course the government would ensure that the stakeholders are protected in whatever arrangement we arrive at. Thank you.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question 199 to the Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The government of Trinidad and Tobago had given the approval for the establishment of a sugar heritage village and museum on lands and buildings formerly owned by Caroni 1975 Limited in the vicinity of Brecon Castle, Couva. In accordance with minute number 1523 of September 29, 2016, Cabinet agreed, inter alia, that the project, the Sugar Museum, be returned to the original concept of establishing a sugar museum at Sevilla House as approved by Cabinet Minutes 3476 of December 16, 2004, and the project referred to above be placed under the Ministry of Community Development, Culture and the Arts. In light of this, the Ministry's technical officers conducted site visits in 2017 and recommended that in order to make this facility functional, the following works be undertaken: completion of electrical upgrade, termite treatment of building, general repairs to broken windows and doors, and general maintenance of the external environment. These works are scheduled to commence within fiscal 2017-18 with a view to opening to the public the museum in 2018.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. From my knowledge, the building that was formerly the clinic at Brecon Castle was fully functional and open to the public. And also at Sevilla, it was open to the public. Both of these buildings that are part of the Sugar and Heritage Museum is in the constituency of Couva South. Is the minister aware that these buildings have been padlocked and is overgrown with bushes and so on, and is closed to the public?
Minister, Culture.
Madam Speaker, these buildings have been closed to the public since before I assumed office in 2015. So it's not now that the buildings are closed. They were closed during the tenure of the last government as well. They were open for a very brief time, and because there was no particular plan going forward dealing with them, they had to be shut. And so I met them as they were shut in 2015. And then the Cabinet had to make a decision because there was a revived plan that included not only the museum, but there was also a golf course and so on attached to this project with a budget that could not be supported at this time. And therefore, we had to make a decision on this closed and halted project. We did so, and therefore we are going forward with the original concept, which is the museum, and that work will begin. And we expect the museum to be open in 2018.
Couva South.
Madam Speaker, is the minister aware that she is misleading the House?
Member for Couva South. I would just ask you to withdraw that comment, please.
Madam Speaker, under what standing orders?
Member for Couva South. I'm certain that you don't mean that. I give you another opportunity to withdraw the statement that you made after the Minister of Culture, Community Development, Culture and the Arts spoke.
Madam Speaker, I'm guided. I withdraw.
Thank you very much. Member for Chaguanas East, supplemental.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Supplemental to the Honourable Minister. Honourable Minister, could you say what is the cost of works to be done when moving forward with the decision you have made?
Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Madam Speaker, the site visits having been done, we are now preparing the RFPs and we'll be able to determine the cost when that process has been completed.
Member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 205 to the Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, currently, no secondary school in Trinidad and Tobago is fully prepared for online e-testing in the Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate mathematics and English exams in 2018? Answer to B, approximately 21,000 candidates are expected to sit the CSEC exams in mathematics and English in 2018. An answer to section C, Madam Speaker, CXC has advised that the Ministry of Education in each of the countries in which CSEC is administered can proceed with e-testing when the necessary requirements are in place. To this end, the Ministry appointed a committee to conduct an audit of the ICT infrastructure to determine the readiness of schools to undertake e-testing. A number of areas were examined by this committee, including availability of laptops, desktop computers for candidates, reliability and speed of internet connections to schools, Wi-Fi distribution of internet to examination rooms, supply of electrical power to examination rooms, the number of candidates expected to sit CXC examinations in 2018. Madam Speaker, our audit has revealed that there are significant gaps with respect to bandwidth, reliability, and speed of internet connection, internet and the Wi-Fi distribution, and in several instances, electrical supply to examination rooms. The Ministry of Education is working systematically to address these issues and to engage the various stakeholders in the process. Principals of secondary schools, both public and private, have been engaged in and apprised of the requirements for e-testing. The Ministry of Education, our ICT division, is also currently engaged in discussions with local internet providers in an attempt to ascertain the most effective approaches to meet the requirements for bandwidth and connectivity in schools. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Education is mindful of the need to keep abreast with emerging technologies and is willing to work towards getting the infrastructure in place. In the meantime, the Ministry of Education will continue with paper-based testing until we are satisfied that all requirements from both the Ministry and the CXC sides are met. Thank you.
For Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Supplemental. So, Minister, are you saying that we will not be ready, the schools in Trinidad and Tobago will not be ready for this e-testing in 2018?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, yes, I'm saying that we will not be ready in 2018.
Member for Chaguanas East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will we be ready in 2019?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, as I indicated just now, we are doing everything possible to ensure that we keep abreast with the technological changes, and it is our hope that by 2019 we'll be ready to have these tests administered. Thank you.
Member for Kamucha Manzanilla.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, Honourable Minister, in light of the fact that you would require the ongoing services of ICT technicians, will they be given full-time contracts as opposed to month-to-month contracts? Thank you.
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, the Cabinet is about to pronounce on the ICT technicians in our schools, and until that decision is made, I cannot reveal further.
Member for Chaguanas West.
Honourable Minister, supplemental. Having regard to your statement with respect to keeping abreast of emerging technological change, how can you justify and deal with the fiasco over the CSEC results?
I'm going to allow that as a supplemental question. Member for Tabakit.
Speaker, question number 207 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, during the period 2010 to 2016, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service purchased 908 vehicles as follows. In 2010, no vehicles were purchased. 2011, 74. 2012, 103. 2013, 426. 2014, 150. wrong, 2014, 150, 2015, 124, 2016, 31.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister, between 2011 and 2015, the People's Partnership government purchased 55% of what I understand the available number of vehicles to the police service. How many vehicles are actually available to the police service at this point in time, and how many are serviceable? Do you have that?
Madam Speaker, I cannot say how many vehicles are available right now. What I can say, the total amount of vehicles in the police service right now are 1,351. There's a shortage right now of about 349 vehicles right now. I can't see how many are serviceable at this point in time, but I can give you the total amount.
Member for Tabaki. Member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, question number 209 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam President. Madam Speaker, sorry. Information obtained from the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service indicate that measures are being undertaken to treat the inadequacies in manpower within the prison system. One such measure is the recruitment of additional prison officers and drivers. In this regard, advertisements inviting applications for male prison officers and drivers were circulated in 3 newspapers in July 2017. In total, Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service received 2,207 responses to the advertisement for prison officers and 1,254 responses to the advertisement for prison drivers. The recruitment process is ongoing, and the prison service is currently compiling a list of the qualified candidates to provide to the Service Commissions Department, which will notify the said candidates of the examination date. Notwithstanding this overall strategy to address these inadequacies, in the interim, the Commissioner of Prisons has advanced a number of short-term workforce planning strategies to maximize existing resources, while also ensuring there is no breach in security. These include granting approval for prison officers to work extra hours, sanctioning that prison officers take up extra duties, authorizing a temporary reduction in the number of persons allowed to proceed on vacation leave, and augmenting the staff complement with the officers who resume duties from official leave by placing them in specific areas where the demand is high. In addition to the aforementioned, a review of the organizational structure of the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service is ongoing. Ultimately, this review will provide guidance and clarity on specific human resource needs and other issues, and lend support to the prison service manpower management process, thereby informing staffing and budgetary decisions. Madam Speaker.
Request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance. Statements by ministers.
The Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have been directed by the Cabinet to make a statement on the status of the poverty reports for Trinidad and Tobago based on the Survey of Living Conditions 2014. The understanding of living conditions in Trinidad and Tobago have over the last 30 years depended to a large extent on 2 major studies, the Survey of Living Conditions and the Household Budgetary Survey. The Household Budgetary Survey is a national survey focusing on household expenditure on goods and services. The Survey of Living Condition is a report that analyzes the standard of living of the people and is based on a study which collects socio-economic data at the individual and household levels. The main purpose of the SLC is to provide primary data for the construction of poverty estimates as it relates to the annual minimum cost of a food basket, an indigence line, a poverty line, and a variety of other indicators to enable regional and international comparisons. The SLC also facilitates the planning process and informs program design. The provision of valid and reliable data is therefore of utmost importance. The SLC 2014 commenced in April 2014 with the conduct of fieldwork
by the Central Statistical Office. The analysis and reports were prepared by Kyrie Consultants Limited, who was contracted in March 2015 to conduct the analysis and prepare reports. The initial final reports were submitted in November 2015. A further review of the reports was undertaken over the next 3 months to improve their quality. However, on further examination of the final poverty report for Trinidad and Tobago 2014, a number of concerns were identified as follows. One of the key findings was that based on money-metric measures, 24.5% of the population, or approximately 329,609 persons, were living below the poverty lines of $959.25 and $1,014.75 in Trinidad and Tobago, respectively. Figures provided for the labor force and persons with jobs indicated that 22,800 individuals were unemployed. Even if the assumption is that the 22,800 households are without breadwinners, there would have to be approximately 14 persons per household for the 24.5% to make sense. This seemed highly unlikely. In addition, when consideration was given to Trinidad and Tobago's minimum wage and the fact that more than 210,000 persons receive grants and pensions in excess of $1,100 monthly, the accuracy of a 24.5% poverty rate was seriously questioned. 2, Kyrie Consultants were contracted solely to undertake the data analysis, although it is standard for the firm responsible for analysis to review the data collected and to conduct some measure of editing and cleaning of the SLC dataset. The inclusion of the consultants responsible for analysis in the data processing phase is usually done so that certain editing idiosyncrasies could be identified, and the question arose, therefore, whether the exclusion of Kyrie Consultants Limited from this phase could have compromised the integrity of the process and/or findings of the SLC. Third, in terms of appropriateness of sample size, the design made an allowance for a maximum non-response rate of 15% from any of the stratified regions surveyed. It was noted, however, that 9 of the 21 districts surveyed had non-response rates above 15%. These districts included Port of Spain, San Fernando, Mayaro, Rio Claro, and Tunapuna, Piaco. Concerns were expressed regarding the impact of these high non-response rates and what they may have had on the findings for those districts. Due to the foregoing concerns, questions, and other discrepancies regarding the reports for Trinidad and Tobago and the responses to them, the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services decided to seek independent reviews of the poverty report for Trinidad and Tobago for 2014 and the analysis of the SLC 2014. The United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, UNECLAC, and the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, were therefore invited to undertake the reviews and analysis. The reviews concluded there were significant problems with the poverty analysis and that those problems had a major impact on the poverty estimates. They also commented on the use of arguable procedures that, while not necessarily wrong, are doubted due to a lack of accuracy or consistency with the 2005 estimation. The reviews identified inter alia estimation errors in the command script to estimate poverty, also called the do file or starter, a statistical software package utilized in the area of research for data management and statistical analysis. One of the most significant errors was the non-annualization of imputed rent data, which caused gross underestimation of household consumption expenditure. Due to these errors, one of the main conclusions of the UN agencies was that the original poverty estimation outlined in the poverty reports was not valid. Both agencies concluded that correcting the annualization of rent and imputed rent data would reduce the final poverty headcount from 24.5% to approximately 7 to 8%. A concern with respect to the use of the adult equivalent scales was also highlighted. In this connection, the UNDP noted that there was no international consensus regarding the use of adult equivalent scales, as based on the literature, different scales appear to be utilized by different organizations such as OECD and the World Bank. The UN agencies recommended inter alia that the independent review should be used as an opportunity to initiate dialogue between the ministry and the consultants. Two identified issues that should be assessed and agreed upon are the estimation of missing values and the adult equivalent scale. They also suggested that steps should be taken to increase the country's capacity in measuring poverty, recalculating the food poverty line, including a secondary analysis of the change in absolute poverty over time, and the promotion of public debates regarding poverty measurement. Kyrie Consultants Limited was presented with the findings of the reviews and acknowledged the oversight of errors made in the do file and agreed to make the necessary amendments to the code. The consultants also indicated their openness to changing the equivalent scale to one that allows the interpretation of the data with respect to a reference person. Additionally, with respect to the suggestion to recalculate the poverty line using standard methodology, the consultant agreed to recalculate using its acceptable methodology. The poverty report for Trinidad and Tobago, together with the reviews of the UNDP and UNECLAC, and the response of Kyrie Consultants Limited were referred to the Central Statistical Office as the official national statistical authority for its consideration. The CSO's conclusions were similar to those of the UN agencies. Based on the findings, the errors in estimation, and the number of inconsistencies identified by the UN agencies and endorsed by the CSO, the integrity of the information contained in the final poverty report for Trinidad and Tobago 2014 was considered compromised and the reports duly rejected. The Parliament is also informed that the poverty report and the SLC 2014 dataset would be handed over to the CSO for follow-up action with Kyrie Consultants, and that the CSO would soon commence the conduct of the SLC 2018 in collaboration with the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, the 2018 budget will be presented on Monday, the 2nd of October, 2017 at 1:30 p.m.
Personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister.
Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 79.3, I beg to move that the proceedings on the Insurance Bill 2016 be resumed in the next session at the adoption of the report stage, and that consequently the work of the Joint Select Committee established to consider and report on this bill be saved.
Honourable members, the question that the proceedings on the Insurance Bill 2016 be resumed in the next session at the adoption of the report stage, and that consequently the work of the Joint Select Committee be established to consider and report on this bill be saved. All in favor say aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In accordance with Standing Order 79.3, I beg to move that the proceedings on the Gambling, Gaming and Betting Control Bill 2016 be resumed in the next session at the adoption of the report stage, and that consequently the work of the Joint Select Committee established to consider and report on this bill be saved.
Honourable members, the question is that the proceedings on the Gambling, Gaming and Betting Control Bill 2016 be resumed in the next session at the adoption of the report stage, and that consequently the work of the Joint Select Committee established to consider and report on this bill be saved. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 79.3,
I believe this will be taken later in the proceedings.
Sure.
Public business, government business, motions.
Honourable members, the debate on the following motion, which was adjourned on Friday, September 8, 2017, will be resumed. Be it resolved that the Senate amendments to the Bail, Access to Bail Amendment Bill 2017, listed in Appendix 2, be now considered. On the last occasion, the Attorney General was giving his wind-up contribution to Clause 5 of the Bail, Access to Bail Amendment Bill 2017. I now call upon the Attorney General. You now have 9 minutes left.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's really just to perfect the business that was incomplete on the last occasion when, regrettably, the members of the opposition refused to support the continuation of the work in a positive fashion, notwithstanding the fact that their members in the Senate had originated the very amendments which are before the Honourable House. Madam Speaker, there was, on the last occasion, raised in respect of Clause 5 of the bill, which we are seeking to adopt amendments for, an inquiry with respect to the inclusion of Section 12 of the Bail Act as it relates to the amendment at section. I did not.
And the casted vote, it was passed. From you wrong.
I recognize the anxiety of everybody to assist. Member for Point of Pear. The question wasn't put and the winding up wasn't complete. 9 more minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Not surprised that the honourable members were not following in their anxiety to obstruct on the last occasion. Madam Speaker, the propriety of the amendment, that is, deleting the reference to Section 12.4 as it appears in Section 17 of the parent legislation and replacing it with a reference simply to Section 12 is in fact an appropriate one for adoption by this Honourable House. It is to anchor into law the ability to forfeit all forms of security as may be provided by the discretion of the Honourable Court when it makes a decision with respect to security. Section 12, which is referred to by reference in Section 17, is the provision which requires security to be placed in respect of flight risks. However, the only mandatory aspect of Section 12 of the parent law is in fact the obligation to surrender to bail. In those circumstances, it is entirely appropriate to adopt the forfeiture provision on the broad footing that is now proposed, and I beg to move.
Honourable members, the question is that this House agree with the Senate in the amendments to Clause 5 of the Bail, Access to Bail Amendment Bill 2017. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Honourable members, the debate on the following motion, which was in progress when the House adjourned on Friday, May 26, 2017, will be resumed. Be it resolved that the Senate amendments... Just excuse me 1 minute. Candace. Read that again, honourable members. The debate on the following motion, which was in progress when the House adjourned on Friday, September 8, 2017, will be resumed. Be it resolved that the Senate amendments made to the Criminal Procedure, Plea Discussion and Plea Agreement Bill 2017, listed in Appendix 3, be now considered. On the last occasion, the clerk read the amendments to Clause 2. I will now call upon the Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this House agree with the Senate in the amendments to Clause 2 of the Criminal Procedure, Plea Discussion and Plea Agreement Bill 2017. Madam Speaker, the amendments proposed at Clause 2 are, in essence, best disaggregated by reference to the individual aspects of the clause. And if you would permit me to do that so that it may make sense to honourable members as they follow in the proposals brought from the members of the Senate. I should add that it was in fact by virtue of a special select committee of the Senate in which there was strong participation by members in relation to the work that was done there by the opposition, independent and members of the government, that we had the advantage of coming back with significant reflections upon the bill. That flowed into the Senate's work on the committee stage, clause by clause, and coming out of that, there was some retooling of the legislation. Some of it stylistic, some of it to ease with the read of the law, some of it to cause some improvements which honourable members made by way of suggestion. I reflect firstly upon the proposal for the deletion and substitution under the definition of improper inducement. In dealing with that particular point, we were seeking to capture, by the reformulation of subclause A under the definition of improper inducement, we were seeking to capture those persons who could have participated in the plea discussion who would not have been caught other than by way of a restatement. It was submitted by Honourable Senator Choate in particular, and then joined in by Senator Ramdeen, that persons could have been participants in the process on a de facto basis and not a de jure basis. In other words, persons may have involved themselves in the process and not been caught by the definition. In those circumstances, we seek to now change the language by deleting subclauses A and B and instead reformulating into one formula where we will now have an improper inducement reading as A, the laying of a charge or causing a charge to be laid without reasonable cause. We seek also to ensure that persons are not being coerced into concluding a plea agreement. And in that regard, we have sought to add in language to subclause B. Subclause B of the definition of improper inducement would now read the coercion of an accused person or suspect to enter into a plea discussion or conclude a plea agreement, including a threat, 1, to lay a charge or cause a charge to be laid of the type described in paragraph A, and then 2, that any plea of not guilty entered into by the accused person will result upon the accused person's conviction in the prosecutor asking for a sentence more severe than the sentence that is usually imposed upon an accused person who is convicted of a similar offense. C, the misrepresentation of a material fact either before a plea discussion is entered into or during the course of discussion, and D, an offer or promise the fulfillment of which is not the function of the DPP, or E, an attempt to persuade the accused person or suspect to plead guilty, notwithstanding the accused person's or suspect's denial of guilt. The additions there would simply be the introduction of the words or conclude a plea agreement in paragraph B, the deletion of the reference to paragraph B and or in Roman 1 of paragraph B, the deletion of the words by the prosecutor in paragraph C, and that would be, in essence, the clause as remodeled. These amendments really seek to drive at ensuring that misrepresentations in the larger context of a plea discussion are caught by persons who would not, strictly speaking, be the identified person as leading the prosecutorial end of the plea discussion. And in those circumstances, the members of the Senate agreed that it was appropriate to advance those submissions. The second part of Clause 2 that falls for consideration and adoption by this Honourable House is the deletion of the word other and the substitution of the word appropriate as it relates to the definition of relative. It was certainly the subject of significant discussion as we engaged in victim impact statement and the concept of it appearing in law for the first time, that we caught the Trinidad and Tobago context for victims and relatives of victims being allowed to advance a position on behalf of victims in respect of the offense committed by persons who stood before the court and who would participate in plea discussions leading to plea agreements which would result in convictions. In doing that, it was felt that it was better to attenuate the word other into the word appropriate so that we could have the court focus upon establishing a sufficient nexus between the relative and persons who may be associated in the loose social context to the victim. Those, in summary, Madam Speaker, therefore constitute the amendments to Clause 2, and I beg to move.
Honourable members, the question is that this House agree with the Senate in the amendments to Clause 2 of the Criminal Procedure, Plea Discussion and Plea Agreement Bill 2017. Member for Oropuch East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to make a few comments on the amendment before us, as I intend to make comments about other amendments that will come later, but to deal first with Clause 2. If I may just say at the very beginning to the worthy Attorney General that if it's one revealing observation we got in the 10th Parliament by the PNM opposition then was the revelation that what happens in the other place happens in the other place, and this is independent of the other place. You will recall on almost 50 occasions when we dealt with business in the lower house, and the then opposition chose not to take the same line as colleagues in the other place. When we inquired, we were told resoundingly that there are two different houses and they are not obliged to follow the other place. St. Joseph will remember that well, I think, and others. So I would like to ask the Attorney General to save some time. There's no need to tell us who made the recommendations, where it came from, and the qualifications of the people making them, and so on, because we want to deal with this from the perspective of our own chamber and our own comments, as they did in the 10th Parliament. Madam Speaker, to analyze the amendment to Clause 2 and others, it is also important to reflect on the parent bill, the parent bill that is to be amended, and therefore it necessitates quoting from the parent bill to understand what are the changes, what is being contemplated, and why. Now, unless I am in receipt of the wrong bill from the Parliament, there's a major issue here that the Attorney General apparently did not dwell on. Well, certainly not today. I don't know, because of the overwhelming amount of confusion and collapse of last week when the government did not have the numbers to sustain themselves. I'm not sure what happened last week and what did not happen. And I'm not sure if the Attorney General spoke to Clause 2 last week because of the sort of position the government found itself in, and when they had to collapse, I think, quickly and adjourn, and had difficulty in so doing. So I'm not sure if last week or this week we dealt with Clause 2, but I will assume that the Attorney General is dealing with it for the first time. Now, when we look, Madam Speaker, at the original improper inducement piece, because it is part of Clause 2, they are now deleting improper inducement and replacing it by something else. But I'm not sure, delete and substitute the following. I'm not sure to the Attorney General, substitute what? What would be the definition? Is it still the definition of improper inducement? Because you're saying improper inducement, delete and substitute the following: the laying of a charge or causing a charge to be laid without reasonable cause. The difference here, Madam Speaker, as I said before, you have to reflect on the parent bill to understand what you are trying to do here. Now, where does this fall in Section 2? This is definition, interpretation, and you will have a reference to different acts of Parliament and so on. So what are you calling this heading? Is it still to be called improper inducement? It can't be called by all these names, A, B, B1, B2. I don't know if anybody follows what I'm saying, but there's no heading if you delete improper inducement. The other major issue I have to raise here at this stage that carries over into other amendments, but I can't speak to that yet. Again, unless I have the wrong bill before me from the Parliament, there is now this notion of suspect that came into the amendment but was not in the parent bill, unless I'm really reading wrong and I have the wrong copy. Now, the opposition expressed serious concerns with this notion of a suspect and engaging a suspect in a discussion on plea bargaining and being a party to such a bargain as a suspect. I think it took us some time in the House and we spoke on this matter. But the amendments, now, all of them, but we are dealing with Clause 2, filters in to the bill this fundamental change, which, unless I'm mistaken, the Attorney General did not speak to, of suspect. And we will just ask the Attorney General to tell us from Clause 1, because it will override other clauses as well, who brought it in, why, where it come from, and what is the policy position on that. Because is there, for example, is there a need in the interpretation section to define what is a suspect, or is it that it is well known in the normal course of action in this area of the law that you know what a suspect is, and so on. Madam Speaker, we spoke about this matter having enormous danger that the police, and I want to make the point that when we make law, yes, in the interest of justice, but as part of our principle that we follow is also to defend citizens. To defend citizens from the arbitrary use of the law, to defend citizens from the abuse, to defend citizens from a breach of the rule of law by anyone in the law enforcement community. Right.
I regret the interruption, 48.1. We're discussing a specific relevance to the clause as proposed. The Honourable Member is speaking to things that are nowhere in the reflective context of this clause, and he is redebating an entire policy position, which we have passed already. So 48.1.
You're bringing suspect on this one. Yeah.
My recollection of the original debate is that that term suspect was debated in the original debate. So it would be in the bill as passed here. So that while I gave the members some leeway because it appears in the amendment from the Senate, I am really not going to allow a rehash of the discussion about suspect and the policy position, so that I therefore ask you to contain yourself within the context of the amendment.
Madam Speaker, just so that I may be properly briefed and guided, so I do not trample upon the standing orders and your ruling, it is being suggested that the word suspect was never in the parent bill. It now appears in an amendment, but because we debated it on the floor, it now finds its way into an amendment in written form now, that one should curtail the discussion on the amendment and the concept of a suspect, which comes to us now as a written amendment. Is that the position that I'm understanding?
The concept of suspect, as my recollection allows, was introduced in the bill that already came before us. And that was already debated. Suspect as appearing here is not new. While this is a new provision, suspect has already been debated in the bill that we already passed here. And therefore, what you're articulating is something that was ventilated in the bill as passed here. And therefore, if you wish to speak about the effect of this amendment coming from the Senate, I will allow it. If, however, you're going to deal with the issue about whether there should be a suspect, where this come from, that was already ventilated on this floor.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very, very, very much. So, Madam Speaker, we did not have this term suspect. We have it now. I'm in mortal fear of asking where it come from. But I can ask the Attorney General to outline for us, since it is an amendment proposed in writing now, what are the implications of doing this? What are the implications of using a suspect as a party to a plea agreement when the suspect has not been charged, may not ever be charged at all, even with or without in furtherance of a plea discussion? You see,
Member for Orupuch, I'll give you a little leeway, but please be guided by what I have ruled and therefore not revamp the whole discussion.
Okay.
Okay, please.
Madam Speaker, I suspect I can go no further with that. I will go to B. I will go to B, where we talk about relative and appropriate and other. And to ask the Attorney General, again, what are the implications and consequences of this change for relative, and to ask, because we are trying to follow from two documents we received from the Parliament, and to ask the Attorney General to again tell us what is the heading, under which heading this will fall. If improper inducement is deleted, what is the new heading of this definitional area that he is proposing? And, Madam Speaker, the gist or the intent of improper inducement continues with this amended definition. It is just, I think, the bringing in of that term that I don't want to call, and it is the change with the reference to relative. But at E, it's quite instructive as well. An attempt to persuade the accused person or that name to plead guilty, notwithstanding the accused person's or suspect's denial of guilt. Madam Speaker, in bringing amendments like this, it would be useful if the Attorney General, briefed by staff of the Attorney General office and by others as well, I imagine, could indicate to us in layman terms, because when you make amendments like these and you pass legislation, it's for the layman. It is for ordinary people who go to court, ordinary people. And it is for lawyers as well, many of whom may not still understand some of this. But you are saying that the accused person, if that person or the suspect has a denial of guilt, it is an offense to attempt to persuade the accused person or suspect to plead guilty.
But this is nowhere in the definition of relative.
I'm speaking to E.
Speaking to Attorney General, Clause 2 amendment, there is a subclause E under E. And I think this is what the honourable member is asking for some explanation.
You're correct. He actually went on to relative.
No, and he came back to this. Please.
The Attorney General may be a bit anxious to move on, but we're also just asking the question. You don't need to get touchy and so on. We're just asking the question as to where, how, and in what form is a denial of guilt recorded? A denial of guilt recorded. And our understanding of a negotiation is that you have to seek to persuade. So is it that once someone, a suspect or an accused person, states for the record a denial of guilt, that person is no longer fair game to engage in a bargain, in a plea bargain? Because in the practical workings of this matter, a suspect or a person accused will begin by a denial of guilt. Because if they don't begin with a denial of guilt, they could begin with a confession. But Madam Speaker, I don't want to make, I want to say hypothetically, that if someone is accused of something, it is almost standard practice that they begin with a denial of guilt. Absolutely. Someone is accused of ripping off oil, they begin by saying, no, I don't know anything about that. Yeah. It never happened. I don't know. There's a denial of guilt. It is a default automatic position. Now, what happens is that a crime as contemplated by this section. So if someone begins by saying, I know nothing of this, I read it in the news, and not me. They get their lawyer, write a letter, and so on. There's an automatic denial of guilt. How do you now go to a plea bargain arrangement without persuading the accused person or suspect, in this case, to change their mind? I just don't understand the practical operationalization of something like that.
For Orpuchis, Honourable Member for which your speaking time is now spent.
Okay, I'll speak.
Yes? Member for Caroni East.
Madam Speaker, this issue on Clause 2E is fraught with issues of fundamental rights of citizens. And as you mentioned, the whole issue of suspect was discussed earlier, but 4E, now they bring it in here. Now, Madam Speaker, bear with me for just a few seconds. In the practical world, an officer of the law comes and says, I suspect you to have done X and Y, and I have 15 charges on you.
Are you on Clause 2?
Yes, 2.
Clause 2.
2E. Yeah, 2E, Madam Speaker. You are a suspect in so-and-so case. You are now accused of doing X, Y, Z. How we want you to have a plea agreement. And then for that now, we want you to give information of X and Y. You are suspect in this case, no charges known. They just go and tell the person you're a suspect to be charged. These are the charges, 5, 10, or 15 charges. We will let you off on all of these charges if you give information about X and Y. That is the most deadliest part of this piece of legislation, Madam Speaker. And this is unacceptable. Because why do you go to a suspect? Why it just can't be an accused? So that's the issue that we're talking about.
That is rehashing an issue that was dealt with. What we're dealing with is a definition of improper inducement, and therefore I will allow you to speak if you are dealing with these definitions as they relate to an improper inducement.
Well, I'm just asking for the deletion of the word suspect inside there, Madam Speaker. Okay. All right, I've made my point on that issue. And then I just want to ask, as my colleague was coming to, but his time ran out, was the issue of substituting for other appropriate. Madam Speaker, I mean, here we have a number of attorneys in the chamber. But for me as a layperson, if you on the parent law, it says relative and a parent, a spouse, a person, a child or a stepchild or other dependent, and they want to substitute other dependent by appropriate. What is appropriate? And as far as I have been, I went to the thesaurus, I went to the dictionary. I didn't know whether you have a law dictionary that says appropriate, defines appropriate. But the synonyms for appropriate, suitable, proper, fitting, or suitable or proper in the circumstances. So how is that relevant here? What does substituting other and putting in appropriate, who does that signify? It is ambiguous and really has no proper meaning inside it. Madam Speaker, you would know, I think you will understand clearly, and there are a number of attorneys who deal with the criminal law here, and we have one on the other side, one on this side. So perhaps this could be a matter that the Attorney General could amplify and discuss why. We know that the work of the other place was quite a lot, but even having been through there and coming here now with that definition and putting in appropriate for other, it is still confusing, Attorney General. And therefore, I think the word appropriate is inappropriate there now. So, Madam Speaker, these are my 2 points. I am asking for deletion of the word suspect and the issue of the appropriate. Yeah.
Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank my learned colleague, the last speaker, for bringing some sense into the debate. I wish to respond, unfortunately, to the observations made by Urupuch East, again demonstrating a fundamental lack of preparation. The honourable member started off by saying he wasn't sure if we spoke to Clause 2. A, having been present on the last occasion, B, having voted down the fact of the continuation of the debate, and C, not bothering to have reflected upon the records of the Parliament, which are in black and white. The honourable member also went on to speak to what he put the deletion of improper inducement, which begs the question as to whether he even bothered to read what was actually on the Senate table, as now brought onto the House's table. We are not proposing the deletion of improper inducement. We are proposing an amendment to improper inducement. So I cannot understand how the honourable member could come to the conclusion that the phrase was being deleted. It just begs the question of whether there's preparation at all in Urupuch East's contribution. The honourable member went on to say that there was what happens after a denial of guilt. And he posited that there would be no fair game for a plea bargain, again begging the question as to whether the honourable member even read the bill. Because the bill specifically speaks to the fact that...
Insulting my colleague. Reading the bill.
Continue, please.
Thank you. Again begging the question as to whether the honourable member even bothered to read the bill. Because the bill specifically provides for the entry into a plea bargaining discussion at any time before conviction. I mean, that's just pellucidly clear, and it's quite embarrassing for a senior member of the opposition to come and make these statements just for the purposes of saying something. There must be context in this debate.
It's embarrassing.
Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, Madam Speaker, it is unfortunate and embarrassing to receive submissions of the type volunteered by Urupuch East. I'm not surprised, but it is embarrassing. Madam Speaker, the Honourable Member for Caroni East spoke to the concept of the redefinition of relative by the qualifying context of appropriate being put to the nexus to the relative. The context is, and the honourable member asked who deals with this. He volunteered a submission that it was ambiguous, and he said that he could find no proper meaning. The context of that particular amendment is grounded in the fact that it is within the court's discretion to consider what appropriate means, and it is to be interpreted in the context of the literal meaning of the word, insofar as a court would be invited to consider a nexus between a relative and a relative in the broader context of Trinidad and Tobago. The use of the qualifying word appropriate is not uncommon to jurisdictions such as ours. It is in fact represented by the wide definition that one gets for the cohabitational relationship structures in our society, and therefore there is ample precedent in our jurisdiction to deal with this. In those circumstances, Madam Speaker, I beg to move.
Honourable members, the question is that this House agree with the Senate in the amendments to Clause 2 of the Criminal Procedure Plea Discussion and Plea Agreement Bill 2017. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
Clause 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 18, 24, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 34, 36, and schedule.
Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this House agree with the Senate in the amendments to clauses 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 18, 24, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 34, 36, and the schedule of the Criminal Procedure Plea Discussion and Plea Agreements Bill 2017, so volunteered by agreement between the two houses via their leaders, the two benches of this Honourable House. Madam Speaker, Clause 4 of the bill, now brought before us, seeks to pluck 5 amendments which the Honourable Senate has provided to this House for consideration. In the first round, if I could take the first of the 5 elements, we're proposing that in the chapeau, after the word made, that we insert the words in the interest of justice, so that it will now read, for the purposes of this act, a plea agreement is an agreement made in the interest of justice between the prosecutor and accused person or suspect. This amendment was considered appropriate for consideration so that the court would be enveloped into consideration of usual parameters in law which the courts are called upon to consider as being in the interest of justice. These are terms of art in the law, in the administration of justice, and the other phrase that usually goes along with that is in the administration of justice, and it is meant to tie in the prevention of abuse where there is insufficiency of evidence in particular. That flows logically to the second part of amendments to Clause 4, and that is where we seek to insert after the word suspect the words where there is evidence to sustain charges against such persons. It means that in subclause B3, the clause would now read as follows. B would start, the prosecutor agrees to take a particular course of action, including, and subclause 3, an undertaking not to institute charges against family members or friends of the accused person or suspect where there is evidence to sustain such charges against such persons. This again was volunteered by the Senate as an appropriate consideration for the House for adoption to seek to prevent the abuse for insufficiency of evidence. And albeit that the language expands the thought already there, it was considered to be an appropriate expansion simply to safeguard against abuses, which members of this Honourable House had also raised on the first occasion of considering this bill. The third part of amendments really are now in subclause B4, where we seek to delete the word by and substitute the word on. This is really just a stylistic change. It causes no real impact into the interpretation of that subclause B Roman 4. The fourth part would be the deletion of subclause B Roman 7. We propose to delete B Roman 7, which would have provided that the prosecutor agrees to take a particular course of action, including, and here's what Roman 7 said, an undertaking that a conviction pursuant to a plea agreement will not be used as evidence of bad character at the trial for a specified offense or for another offense. Honorable members of the Senate felt that this was appropriate for the discretion of the court and that bad character evidence should not be excluded as a statutory provision, and instead it should be left to the discretion of the court to consider that, because it may well be appropriate for the introduction of bad character evidence in certain egregious circumstances or where the prosecution considered it appropriate. It does not prevent us, however, from it not being admitted in the circumstances of the aim and intention behind plea bargaining in and of itself. The fifth part of this clause 4, which is proposed for adoption, is in subclause B Roman 8 to delete the words by complaint rather than by information and submit instead the formula summarily rather than indictably. Again, this is a stylistic change grounded in terms of the utilization of language, which one can find between Chapter 1201, the Preliminary Inquiries Act, and Chapter 420, which is the Summary Courts Act. I move on next to Clause 5, Madam Speaker. Clause 5, we propose that there be a small amendment in a reformulation and tightening of language. We propose that there is a deletion and substitution such that Clause 5 would now read, instead of having the breakout in subclauses A to E, there would be one paragraph restated as follows. A plea discussion may be held and a plea agreement concluded at any time before conviction, including before charges are instituted. This was thought to be necessary simply because the breakout could have been subsumed in one paragraph rather than in the individual statement of the specific time markers of before charges, during committal, before arraignment, anytime after committal, or anytime during summary offense. So it was a tightening up of the expression of language used there. I move on to Clause 8, Madam Speaker. It is proposed that Clause 8 effectively be substituted as follows, and that as appears on the position and as appears on the submission. Excuse me, one moment. I was told that there's no time. Madam Speaker, in subclause 8, we're proposing a restatement as circulated, and in the restatement as circulated, it really is just a restructure and renumbering exercise in clause 8, where we say that the prosecutor should not initiate or participate in plea discussions unless there are certain circumstances provided as restated. In clause 9, we're proposing that the words shall not be inserted, that after the word shall not, that we insert the words initiate or. This submission is intended to extend the prohibition on prosecutors from encouraging plea discussions where representation is in effect. And if there is representation by an attorney at law, then there was a request that there be a further safeguard so that all aspects of the initiation of the plea discussion could be captured. I move on to clause 10. In clause 10, we're proposing the deletion of subclause 1 and the substitution as appears in the amendments as circulated. What we're seeking to do here is to really express constitutional rights which are guaranteed in any event. One always knows that Section 2 of the Constitution expresses the supremacy of the Constitution. There's no technical need for the expression of entrenched rights as a matter of course into statutory laws, but nonetheless, we've taken the opportunity to be expansive in the expression, to provide for the right to legal aid, to provide for the protection against self-incrimination, as appears in the Constitution, to provide for the right to be presumed innocent, the right to remain silent, and the right to seek a sentence indication of the court for maximum sentence. That latter point, of course, being something which has been incorporated by way of the Goodyear principle, now the subject of a direction and practice direction by the Chief Justice, so gazetted. The amount of the reflection of those amendments which I've just referred to, the expression of stated rights and practice directions, finds itself repeated in the further provisions suggested in Clause 10 for amendment. And that includes the agreement of plea discussions being recorded, being removed. It was felt that the inclusion of plea discussions being recorded, particularly in circumstances where there was a lack of representation, that would perhaps infringe against the right of self-incrimination. And that, of course, is something which we have to be very careful to provide against, and so the recommendation was provided in that form. We have dealt with the issue of competence in subclause in Roman 2 as an inclusion that would happen there. In that particular point, we took avail of the discussions as to competence which we had dealt with in the committal proceedings, another piece of law which, without reviving that piece of law, we felt that there should have been proper consideration on. So we've added in the concept of competence, which would cause a court to explore the competence of persons engaged in plea discussions as a matter of requirement for the court, so that somebody who was not mentally incompetent or with diminished responsibility found himself unwittingly admitting to a plea bargaining discussion, moving into a plea agreement which could have been otherwise avoided. In B of this particular amendment, we are reflecting again upon the so-called rights of the Constitution being expressed again, as we provide for in subclause 2. I move on to clause 11. In subclause 1, we're proposing the deletion of certain words as they appear in the circulated amendments, and the addition of the words including the relevant evidence against him, including any evidence in the possession of the state. This is to insert into the law the common law discovery and disclosure provisions, such that you are obliged to produce the evidence which is detrimental to the state's case as an automatic consideration for disclosure, and importantly, that we take avail of all evidence for disclosure which the state may have, and not just that which the prosecutor may have. So it was felt that this was an improvement to the law in that regard. We have similarly repeated that in subclause B, as it appears in the circulated amounts, in the circulated provisions, forgive me. We have also sought the insertion of the word relevant as a qualifier to evidence, so that again, we're dealing with the safeguard of disclosure and discovery as a protection for the rights of the accused. We move on next to clause 13, Madam Speaker, and in clause 13, we're seeking to make sure, with respect to victim impact statements, that we have, in fact, the provision that there is a voluntary participation in victim impacts. It was felt by members of the Senate that we ought not to put in a mandatory provision. It should instead be a voluntary position, and that the court should understand it in that context, particularly in respect of any adverse inference which may be drawn from that. I move on to clause 18, Madam Speaker. Clause 18 deals with the filing of victim impact statements, and it was really an attenuation to insist that the filing of statements be done in any event before, that it be exchanged, in any event before it is filed at the court. And that is to avoid a wastage of time consequent upon adjournments occasioned by late service, so that we could actually act in the best administration of justice. I move on to clause 24, Madam Speaker. In clause 24, we are repeating the proposals which we have added in respect of clause 10, specifically by the recanting of rights against self-incrimination and the renumbering of clauses as so provided in the circulated draft. We are seeking as well in clause 24 to insist that the judicial officer have a reflection in considering the propriety of adopting a plea discussion into a plea agreement, that there was no improper inducement to enter into plea discussions or conclude a plea agreement. I move to clause 27. In clause 27, Madam Speaker, we are seeking to make amendments to avoid persons having the opportunity to jump the queue. By jumping the queue, we would have found ourselves, we could have jumped the queue in the original language because there was a prescription that the matter be listed for trial, as opposed to return to the court to then enter into the queue. It is to avoid an abuse of process where persons could have elected to go into the system in non-genuine circumstances and then cause an acceleration of the time frame for their trials before the High Court. I move to clause 28, Madam Speaker. We're seeking to adjust the time frames away from 14 days instead to 28 days to be more realistic as to the time frame that it takes to involve oneself in the type of process and the administration of justice. That finds itself similarly in clause 29, where we make an adjustment to the time frame away from 14 days to 28 days. I move to clause 30, Madam Speaker. We are proposing to disaggregate the provisions against appeal away from the circumstances where there is withdrawal or setting aside of agreements. And in that regard, Madam Speaker, what we're seeking to do is to make it clear the circumstances that one engages in causing a withdrawal from a plea agreement, in causing a setting aside of that which has been agreed, and then in allowing for an appeal on that which has already been entered, because they're three separate circumstances. That would naturally flow into the observations in clause 31, as appears in the draft as circulated, where we have disaggregated the setting aside of plea agreements from appeals per se, again to allow for a better fluidity in the understanding of the application and process of the law. I move to clause 34. We are seeking to qualify the sealing of records by making it such that they are only sealed in exceptional circumstances as opposed to automatically, and that sealing is caused in the interest of justice, again a term of art, as a qualifying statement to ensure that the courts don't just seal everything automatically. Clause 36, as I come to a close, we propose instead of the minister making regulations that it goes to the Rules Committee, as is the normal circumstance, and in the schedule we've taken a care of the necessary consequential amendments caused to the schedule by way of adoption that we now have. In those circumstances, Madam Speaker, I beg to move.
Honourable members, the question is that this House agree with the Senate in the amendments to clauses 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 18, 24, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 34, 36, and the schedule of the Criminal Procedure Plea Discussion and Plea Agreement Bill 2017. Member for St. Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is unfortunate, the statement that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. This legislation really has a genesis in an effort, and I congratulate the Attorney General and this House and the upper house for the efforts they've made to bring legislation that could truly be a tool in crime fighting, to limit the length of time in terms of investigation, to limit the time in terms of the court, and indeed, what is most significant, as a tool in a weapon against cohorts, co-conspirators, and others involved in crime. But I think we've missed the mark altogether, Madam Speaker, because in this legislation, and I hope I could be borne out to be wrong, there is absolutely no penalty imposed on a person who uses this doorway into our judicial conscience to walk with a dagger and use the machinery that we are creating here today, not as a tool in crime fighting, but as a weapon that will leave a bloody mess with those who might be innocent. Madam Speaker, it is obvious that there are many who will be highly motivated to access this new mechanism to avoid lengthy jail terms or even the penalty of death in certain matters, and that they must produce to that effort to avail themselves some material usable by the police and the prosecution to further prosecutions against other persons. In this era, and in particular the recent past, I had grave concern when I read in the newspaper last weekend of a meeting of the highest levels of national security, where it was reported that a minister of this government instructed the head of special branch to lay charges against, I do not know the name of the person or whomever, but a constable, I believe, in the police service. This person having been investigated, the report...
Standing order 48-6. All the 48s.
Member for St. Augustine. One, in terms of, I would like you to tie your contribution strictly to the amendments before the House. Nobody raised 48-1, but this is coming from the chair. In terms of the statement that you made, even though it may be a statement you read in the newspaper, I think you have to be careful because whatever you say, it is really your statement here. Okay? And therefore, you don't want to offend Standing Order 48-6.
That's why I have waited with bated breath for any denial that that meeting ever took place. And I've not heard it. And that is what troubles me to no end. In fact, when we have these suspicions, whether they are grounded in truth or in reality, or whether they're just fictitious, it is very fertile ground for very good legislation to be demonized. And that's the point I'm making. And there is a fix that could be easily done in all of the amendments to deal with this. The way a person who may have been improperly induced to plea, that if it is that it should manufacture evidence, whether with assistance or not, and that it is found out, there should be a special penalty for such persons. To do other, sorry.
Is it that you're proposing a further amendment?
Absolutely, I am. Because otherwise, it will be a rogues gallery for those to present themselves, suddenly getting a conscience call to offload, when in fact it's manufactured evidence, and this country is replete with examples. I do not have the time nor the inclination to repeat myself of the matters that involve Mr. Basti Upande, Dhanraj Singh, Narayan Singh, and a host of others. But if we are today to limit ourselves to just the mechanics of words and say that we've done amendments, and we have not fit that foundation upon which all of this will have credibility, then we are wasting our time. But not just we are wasting our time, we are creating a weapon for the evil in the society to succeed. I do not take credit for this, but I will tell you, when we came into office in 2010 under the Prime Ministership of the Honorable Kamla Persad-Bissessar, one of the things that we decided upon was really to deal with this issue of plea bargaining. And it took a lot of effort and a lot of resistance in the society to get things going. And a lot of work, and the Attorney General, I'm grateful, I think he actually acknowledged the work that had gone long before in our administration and the continuity that is required for good things to come forward. But they did not do the most important and essential thing, that is to protect the innocent. In this period where allegations flow left and right, even our dear Prime Minister is now implicated in some form or fashion, you may have persons who may wish to come forward
Madam
and
Speaker, Standing Order 48-6.
Yes. Let me rephrase. I'm sorry. What I'm saying, no one is above allegations in this country. And when I speak, I don't speak as a member of the opposition or a member or whatever. I speak as a citizen who cares about the future and the judicial system and the processes of this country. If it is that we are to do this thing and to vote for this bit of law, how could we not then appreciate the greatest weakness in it and fix it here and fix it now? It might seem convenient that when you are empowered and in a position of power to feel that the law will not come back and bite you. But when a creature, I understand there's a loose snake in this building, I read it in the papers, right? I do not know. You never know when you could be bit by the very thing that you feel is your friend. So, Madam Speaker, I am not here to do anything other than to give you what I consider my conscience speaking to law that could be very great or be very, very evil. And indeed, I am reminded that what I speak to is not based only on personal feelings, but it is one of the strictures in our scriptures. At Exodus 23:1, it is said, "You shall not bear false report. Do not join your hand with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. You shall not follow the masses in doing evil, nor shall you testify in a dispute so as to turn aside after a multitude in order to pervert justice." I ask of nothing more than if we are to proceed, and I speak for the support of all of us, I'm sure, that if we are to support law, it must be on a basis that it is good law, first of all, it is useful law, but more important than anything else, it must be a tool and not a weapon.
Just in terms of, are you speaking to any one of the specific amendments?
Yes.
And if I understand the general gist, may I ask if it is that you are going to be proposing the text of an amendment?
Thank you very much. I do in relation to improper inducement. You see, because the issue of improper inducement is very wide. One could look at it from a very narrow point of view, that one can be induced to plead against yourself, but one could also be induced to plead against yourself to get a lesser sentence, but that part of the deal would be that you be used as a witness against others. And we have had a long history where there is no testing of the evidence that is created, cultivated, nurtured against others, other than who say what. They take their word, put it in writing, and have it sworn and call that sworn testimony, and that is good enough when there's no scientific or other even logical testing to ascertain whether there is credibility to the very evidence upon which you rely. In Dhanraj Singh, as an example, the witness who was part of murder by his own word, he was part of a conspiracy to kill, and the killing took place, therefore he was a murderer, gave evidence that a door had been locked.
I am really having a bit of a difficulty in that this is very specific.
Yes.
I've heard you said you're talking about improper inducement, which was dealt with and already passed, that so that we can't be dealing with clause 2. If it is you're talking in the general context of the bill, again, I cannot permit this procedure because we are limited to the amendments before us. So I will ask you if it is that you're speaking to one of the clauses that we are now considering. I will allow that. I can't take us back to clause 2, and I cannot allow a general debate.
Well, then I will move directly now to propose that there be included an amendment for a very high penalty for anyone who is found to be manufacturing evidence, lying, or perverting the course of justice in that effort.
Madam Speaker, if I may, if the member will allow, is that the specific amendment that there will be a general, I wasn't sure. Is that the amendment that you're proposing?
To be without doubt and be without uncertainty, there must be an amendment that creates a specific offense with a high penalty for anyone who uses this law and manufactures evidence as a part of the inducement to plead.
And again, is the text going to be circulated, so that I want to know if there is going to be an amendment to put to the House? is that text going to be circulated?
Well, Madam Speaker, I could ask the assistance of the Attorney General's office, and I see members.
Members.
Hold on, moment. I'm a member of the Parliament.
Members, could we have some courtesy, please?
Yes. If I should viva voce suggest it, I do not know if there's a requirement. I have no great skill in legislative drafting. And there are the experts sitting amongst us, and the very purpose that they're here is to assist in these matters. So I do not propose to put a script before this House, but to put the idea for fulmination on the matter.
Okay, may I call now upon the member for Laventille West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I should not be long, except to say that my friend from St. Augustine is saying that he has proposed an amendment, and that amendment is supposed to create an offense for improper inducement, a place we had been before in this debate. That was originally proposed. It was taken out, and the effect of the current law is, for his edification, is that if there is an improper inducement, it will have the effect of nullifying the force and the legality of the plea, rendering it a nullity. That is the effect of it. And Madam Speaker, if anyone is found liable for an improper inducement in that context, lending itself to a nullity in respect of the plea or the agreement, then that officer or that person can be dealt with in accordance with other laws that are in existence, including perverting the course of justice and such like. And where there are heavy criminal sanctions. In addition to those, Madam Speaker, it is the case that, well, I need say no more. I will confine myself to that. And if you accept my propositions in this regard, Madam Speaker, then my friend is taking us again around the mulberry bush quite unnecessarily. We have dealt with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I will address a few matters in the clauses that have been outlined for us to debate pursuant to the motion. Madam Speaker, let me say at the beginning, after my last experience, I will speak to the national community and not to the Attorney General. If hurling abuses and insults is the order of the day, we will not address the government. Okay? I think we are numb to it here, and the national community is numb to bullying, intimidation, insults, and abuse by all. Madam Speaker, I just want to follow up on that matter raised by the member for St. Augustine and quickly by the member for Laventille West. The amendments tampered with before improper inducement, and that's fine, I'm not debating that. In the parent bill, which we debated some time ago, is there an offense of improper inducement with requisite penalties? Is there? No. Because it seemed to me, Madam Speaker, if you create in the interpretation section improper inducement, which you now amend, and that's fine, that is gone, what flows from that in the other clauses here? No special, I think that is the point the member for St. Augustine is making, no special offense is created. While the criminal law may cater for that, in the parent bill, another amendment may have, if the government so minded, another amendment would have created the specific offense of improper inducement pursuant to this piece of legislation and put the penalties associated for it right here. And I think that is what we are talking about, because is it an offense in the first place for improper inducement? As defined here. Yeah, as defined here. It rendered null. But if, for example, the prosecutor in this piece of legislation breaches a conditionality here for improper inducement, then you have to find the penalty in another area of the law, whereas the recommendation here is to create a special offense here pursuant to this. And I think that is something we could merit. I just want to go to a few of the clauses and raise simple questions. But again, at the risk of insult, because I'm raising these questions, you know, I remember, Madam Speaker, when we were in the LRC for several years, under the distinguished chairmanship of the member for St. Augustine, it was common knowledge. Well, the Minister of Finance, who is not the chairman of the FNGP, now talking. It was common knowledge in the LRC that when we go through legislation like this, we would ask colleagues, particularly colleagues who were not in the law, to interpret and explain, and every single area we were asking, explain how do we operationalize it. Explain how could this be abused, and let us stop putting measures now to stop abuse. Now, if that was done, some of these discussions we would not be having in the first place. Huh? So, Madam Speaker, it is of course evident that the word suspect carries over, but we're not going to talk about that anymore. At number 4, Madam Speaker, there's an amendment at 4. In the interest of justice, insert the words in the interest of justice. It comes in here. And that is fine, although I don't know what is the meaning of it. In the parent bill, it says a plea agreement is an agreement made between the prosecutor and the accused person. And now it is made in the interest of justice between the prosecutor and the accused person. At B, the amendment reads, in subclause B3, insert after the word suspect the words where there is evidence to sustain such charges against such persons. Madam Speaker, just the question to ask for the practical operationalizing of this measure at B3. Who sees this evidence where there is evidence to sustain such charges against persons? And this is a matter in plea agreement. Is it that the accused or the suspect or their counsel will see the evidence where there's evidence to sustain such charges? So, again, if I explain it in layman terms, and if I'm correct in the first place, you are making a plea agreement with someone, a plea bargaining, and you are telling them, look, we need you to agree to ABC because we have XYZ on you. And you are saying here where there's evidence to sustain such charges against the person. Who sees the evidence here? Is it that the authority goes to the suspect and accused and say, we have evidence against you? But would they be allowing counsel or the accused or the suspect to see the evidence? Because, Madam Speaker, what obtains now is that you're calling a suspect, you question, Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance will bore the country for 4 hours in the next few weeks, and it's disturbing me now. Madam Speaker, what obtains now is you call in the accused, you question the accused, I understand, for a day and a half. You ask the accused 190 questions. When it is finished, you tell the accused, sit down, and then you go the next morning and you charge. When the accused go to court, the prosecutor says, when the case call in January, we'll tell you about the evidence then. So there is at no time is an accused or an attorney at law, defense attorney, seeing evidence. Now you are saying where there is evidence to sustain such charge against a person, but they will not see it. They will not see it. In fact, the accused person will not even see a search warrant. They can't even see a search warrant. No. Balize House will get that before the accused person get it. And so you cannot, and the Prime Minister has knowledge of these things. Madam Speaker, so the point I'm making,
please,
she cut off.
Madam Speaker, Standing Order 48-6.
Yes, Member for Orupuchis, I rule that it's out of order. So if you could rephrase that. Okay, and also remember to tie in what you're speaking with respect to the amendment that is before us. Okay, you stated an amendment, but you've gone off on something else. Bring it into the amendment.
So, Madam Speaker, I will just stay on this one piece of amendment I'm on. The question I'm asking is just a simple, the earlier point.
Yes, please.
The earlier point I was making is that the prosecution, the police, the prosecutor, will have in their possession evidence of one sort or another. Other people may or may not have it. But as is the practice now, there is no compulsion to show an accused person or counsel what you have. How it works now is like you play poker and you keep the cards to your chest and you question, you question, you arrest, you charge, and when your case come up next 6 months, you may see a search warrant, and next 2 years, disclosure. They will get disclosure as they go along. So in 4B, is this upfronting disclosure? Are you telling the suspect or the accused by 4B here, where there is evidence to sustain such charges against such person? Who sees this evidence? Is it the DPP? Because the accused person or suspect, as of now, don't see evidence.
He may never see it.
He may never see evidence. Yeah. So you are asking people to plea bargain with you based upon what you tell them, what you mamagai, what you intimidate, what you harass, what you torture. But if this will not be shown to an accused or a suspect, they will be told, we have evidence against you, you're facing 30 years in jail. But the law says where there's evidence to sustain, but they will not see it. And my point, just for clarity, is who will see this evidence against the persons where charges can be sustained, and that person or person is a suspect or an accused will not see anything. And just to clarify that.
And when?
And when? If they do is after they're charged. Or is it that when the person sign a plea bargain agreement, then you show them evidence? Madam Speaker, the other point, I want to go on to 5. The other point I go on to 5 now, Madam Speaker. A plea discussion may be held and a plea agreement concluded at any time before conviction, including before charges are instituted. And just to return to the earlier point that a suspect, a person who you have grounds to suspect is guilty of something, and now we are told where you have evidence to sustain a charge that the person will not see, that person qualifies to enter into a plea agreement with the authorities. And the same risk you carry here, that persons are before a law enforcement agency, the police or a branch or a unit of the police service. They do not know what evidence is against them. They are told one or the other, and they now qualify to get into a plea bargaining arrangement on that alone. And that, we have a difficulty with that. Madam Speaker, there's also at Clause 8 something that struck me there as well, at Clause 8. And that deals with prohibition against plea discussions in certain circumstances. And I just go to the parent bill. A prosecutor shall not initiate or participate in a plea discussion or conclude a plea agreement that requires the accused person to plead guilty to an offense that is not disclosed by the evidence. Again, this raises a fundamental question. Did the accused person see the evidence? Or is it in the hands of the DPP? So that it is now a wrong, I don't know if it's an offense, but it's a wrong for the prosecutor to initiate plea discussions or conclude plea agreement which requires an accused person to plead guilty, but that offense is not disclosed on the evidence. Who sees the evidence? Is it the accused person and his counsel? Or is it the DPP? Who is policing, in a way, supervising, overseeing this particular part of the legislation? I think that's a more fundamental question. Who is responsible for overseeing this? Because you're setting here an interesting thing. A regime is coming into place to deal with plea bargaining. But there is no one body or one person overseeing it. Now, when you go to the court, that is after presumably somebody plead guilty. That is after somebody enters into a plea agreement. The court will then supervise it. So the court supervises way after the fact, down the road. By then, somebody in jail for 12 months, 18 months, and so on. And much later after the fact. They create, of course, prohibition against the prosecutor withholding or distorting evidence in the original. The Form 1, I just go to 10 immediately. I notice the Form 1 is out, and I think that is because of the changes that they have brought. Where 10 deals with, just so we know, conditions for entering into plea discussions with an unrepresented accused person. It has been taken out because of the subsequent changes. Madam Speaker, back to clause 10 and one of the amendments here at 7. The accused person has a right to seek sentence indication from the court of the maximum sentence that the court may impose if the accused person pleads guilty to an offense, and that he may elect to have a third party of his choice present during the plea discussions. I'm not sure if in any place, and this is for unrepresented people, I'm not sure in any area here if there's any identity or any qualification of what would be a third party of his choice. Again, I could be wrong. It may be somewhere. But for clarity, you know, someone is engaging you for the purpose of a plea discussion. That person is unrepresented, possibly by choice. You allow the person to have a third party of his choice. Now, who is this third party? Who could it be? A relative, a friend, a co-accused, another suspect, an assistant? I don't know. And maybe when this was drafted, and whoever gave this would have had something in mind that we are not seeing there. Madam Speaker, moving now, the victim impact statement, I think is 13. We go to 13 as well. Before we go that way, I just want to stay at 11 for a minute. I'm trying to follow the amendments here as we have them outlined. The 11 deals with prosecutors' duty to disclose evidence. If plea discussions are initiated before charges are laid, the prosecutor shall inform the accused person of the allegations against him and provide the accused or his attorney with a written summary of the evidence against him. Now, is this now a certain change? Is this actually an inducement? And the member for St. Augustine has a wealth of experience in this process. Whereas in the common practice, there is no requirement to tell people the evidence you have against them. They're putting here now, you're putting here, if plea discussions are initiated but before charges are laid, the prosecutor shall inform the accused person of the allegations against him and provide a written summary of the evidence against him. So you're providing a written summary of evidence, presumably to the legal counsel, of what we have against you. But plea discussions have been initiated. It may end in agreement or it may not. But doesn't this accused person have a big advantage over normal people? Normal accused who is not contemplating plea discussions. So someone is contemplating a plea discussion, they get to see the evidence you have against me. I am not going to be entering into any plea discussion. I don't see the evidence you have against me. How will that work in practice? This is also an inducement for someone to enter. So you can write, and it's a summary, and I'll come back to this business of summary in a little while. But it's a summary of the evidence you have against them, goes to what is now a special accused person, because that person wants to be in a plea bargaining arrangement. Whereas a normal accused person doesn't have this as a matter of law, as a statutory protection even, doesn't have this. And again, I wanted to raise that. I mean, I raised this to the members of the public because you see, Madam Speaker, somebody out there would be an accused, would be a suspect. They would go to a police station and the police station say, well, we want to put you through a plea bargaining arrangement. What you say? And all of this written in law and statute, that sound good. It's nice. But when you reach there, you're squealing or you're not squealing. Yes or no? And they will operate in a particular culture, as the culture of this country. And police culture in this country is a distinct post-colonial police force culture, of which the member for Laventille West was once a part, I think. He was an early recruit to the police, when the requirements, I think, were 3 levels. So, no, I'm not giving way. I know it must be important coming from you, but give me a minute. So, you will have your lawyer, and the point I'm making is you will get a written summary of the evidence, when somebody else will not get a written summary of evidence. So you bring them into this process now, where they may choose not to enter into a plea agreement. But what I'm saying is that an accused person involved in plea discussions and plea agreement, once he says, listen, I want to bargain with you, you see written submission. If somebody not bargaining with you, you don't see it. And there's a particular culture. Yeah.
Remember, we're not dealing with an overall policy. We're now dealing with the amendments that are coming from the Senate. That point you may have made in the earlier debate if you wish. It is not permissible at this stage.
Okay. Madam Speaker, staying with Clause 11, I think I made it. It says in subclause 2, delete the words the evidence against him and substitute the following. The relevant evidence against him, including any evidence in the possession of the state, which materially weakens the case for the prosecution or assists the case for the accused person. So again, this gives a particular advantage to accused persons involved in plea bargaining and plea discussion, that they will see, and I'm very curious about the relevant evidence against him, not the evidence against him. What is deemed to be relevant? Who is determining this relevant evidence to show, as opposed to the evidence against him? If you accuse somebody, you have evidence against them. But now someone in authority will determine the relevant evidence that the person must see. And Madam Speaker, the member for Laventille West had all his time. He chose not to use it. He wants to use mine now. He wants to share my time. So could you please... Yeah, let me proceed, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, and I want to proceed again, offer an inducement to enter plea discussion. Well, I'll jump right down to number 24 now, because I think we're dealing with that as well. 24. It deals with procedure at plea agreement hearing and spells out the plea agreement hearing shall be held in open court unless, etc., etc. And at 3G, they're now suggesting a 3G, FG. Well, it's to insert now. Insert new subclause. Was offered an improper inducement to enter into plea discussion or conclude a plea agreement. And that deals with the procedures. It deals with, before accepting or rejecting a plea agreement, the court shall look into all the circumstances that have been done, that they went through. But that matter dwells here as well, is that this disclosure requirement for plea discussion, whether or not that by itself induces someone to enter into a plea agreement, contrary to the overall policy framework of the bill, which is, I think the overall policy is not to induce, to have people of their free mind give some type of consent. And Madam Speaker, this will also have another, again, I want to make a point that police culture is police culture. It doesn't work like this, following all these things in black and white in the statute. It will work with a heavy hand, given the culture that exists here, and the extent to which this type of amendment, particularly with the inclusion of what we spoke about before, could lead to abuse by persons. So, Madam Speaker, I will just end by reiterating my support for the proposed amendment that a specific offense be developed to deal with this improper inducement pursuant only to this piece of legislation. Madam Speaker, thank you.
Madam Speaker, I start to address the point raised by my learned colleague for St. Augustine in speaking to the encouragement that there be an offense for improper inducement. And I wish to hearken back to the extensive consultation, including those consultations reduced into writing under the tenure of the last government, now opposition, where there was an open agreement that as a result of the presence of Section 5 of the existing law, which created an offense for improper inducement, Trinidad and Tobago was reduced to the position where there have only been 12 plea discussions leading to plea agreements in the time frame. And it was a specific recommendation of all stakeholders, including the circumstances where those stakeholders brought submissions to the government. There was broad agreement under the UNC government that there should be no offense associated, expressed so to be an offense in the parent law. The fact is that the member for Laventille West has put it quite properly. There is, in fact, a sanction to the existence of an improper inducement. Firstly, that the agreement itself is polluted ab initio and is set aside. Secondly, the agreement may itself be withdrawn. Thirdly, it may be the subject of an appeal within the processes prescribed by the bill. Fourthly, the common law applies in particular in relation to the provision of the course of justice, administration of justice. You have breaches of the Judicial and Legal Services Commission in terms of officers of the DPP's office. You have breaches of the standing orders, rules and regulations of the Police Service Act, and therefore one can find oneself in proper criminal circumstances for a breach of an improper inducement. So the law is pellucidly clear that there are sanctions, and laws, of course, operate as articulated together. Madam Speaker, I listened trying to pick sense out of the submission for Oropoch East. I have to say, it is embarrassing. And it is embarrassing for the following reasons. The honourable member stood up, stumbling his way through the bill which he appeared to read for the first time, and he asked in relation to clause 4 of the bill. He asked whether we were dealing with a situation of who is going to disclose evidence? Whose hands are the evidence in? Is it the DPP's evidence? That the accused would not see the evidence. He went into the whole administration pouring scorn upon the fact that evidence would not be disclosed until he stumbled upon it when he saw it in clause 10 and clause 11. Asking serious questions in relation to clause 4, where discovery is not and disclosure is not the subject of clause 4 itself. When he stumbles and reads it for the first time in relation to clauses 10 and clauses 11, he then asks a different question. So he's approbating and reprobating. Blowing hot, blowing cold. Because the Parent Act is absolutely clear that there is an obligation for the prosecutor to disclose evidence. There is an obligation. And if they don't disclose the evidence, you can set aside the agreement. The honourable member then went on to ask whether it was an improper inducement. And he said that there should be no inducement. This bill is about inducement. What this bill is about is saying that there should be no improper inducement. It is an inducement to get a lesser charge, ease up, as the common man would say, ease up in terms of the full brunt of the law to enter into a plea agreement via a plea discussion with due process. And for that reason, it was painful to listen to the member for Oropoch East read the bill for the first time on the floor of the Parliament, because his contribution just does not make sense. I noticed that the honourable member for Oropoch East is talking about talking to the public, and someone may be an accused, and he was wondering if they're going to squeal or not. I can understand the honourable member for Oropoch East being as concerned as he is about people facing the brunt of the law, about people being called upon to answer for charges that they may or may not have happened. There is a police culture, he's correct. I can understand his anxiety and his discomfort, the honourable member, in expressing it as he does. All of us understand it. However, Madam Speaker, the bill is proportionate properly. It is proportionate because it provides for a mechanism from start to finish. A suspect is met with a process that a suspect may choose. If the suspect chooses to enter into a plea discussion, he can either be represented or unrepresented. There is a process for the disclosure and discovery of evidence, so prescribed in the law. The rules of common law also applied in that process. If you do not disclose the evidence provided to you, you will find that the agreement is to be set aside, and then the prosecutor runs into the risk of falling into the circumstance of the other laws applying where improper inducement is, in fact, found to be an ingredient of the engagement. That is obvious. That is clear. The position of the inducement applying in this case is intended to better the course of criminal justice and the system of criminal justice. It is definitely the case that we cannot tolerate the overburdened system that we have. There are 29,090 matters in the magistracy at preliminary inquiry stage. There are approximately 500,000 cases per year passing through the magistrates' court, including liquor licenses, traffic offenses, etc. And this is definitely a tool to better the administration of justice. In all those circumstances, I cannot agree with the member for St. Augustine that this bill ought to have a specific offense for improper inducement, nor can I agree to any of the wild submissions put forward by Oropuch East as he stumbled his way through the bill for the first time. I beg to move, Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that this House agree with the Senate in the amendments to clauses 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 18, 24, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 34, 36, and the schedule of the Criminal Procedure, Plea Discussion, and Plea Agreement Bill 2017. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? No. The ayes have it. Is there a call for division? Okay. All right. Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this House agree with the Senate in the amendments to clauses 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 18, 24.
That has already been moved and carried.
It's on my order paper. I apologize. Right?
Members, may we have some order, please? Attorney General, I now call upon you with respect to the cybercrime bill.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've just received the proper paper before me. Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 79.3, I beg to move that the proceedings... sorry, this is on the subsequent delayed item. Yes, Madam Speaker? Yes. I beg to move that the proceedings on the cybercrime bill be resumed in the next session and that the new committee be established to continue the work of the committee that had been established in this session.
Honourable members, the question is that the proceedings on the cybercrime bill be resumed in the next session and that a new committee be established to continue the work of the committee established in this session. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? Say no. I think the ayes have it. Leader, the Attorney General.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 79.3, I beg to move that the proceedings on the Act to amend the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act, the Proceeds of Crime Act, the Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago Act, the Customs Act, and the Exchange Control Act be resumed in the next session and that a new committee be established to continue the work, be continued in the next session. Thank you, Madam Speaker. That's number 1 on the order paper.
Honourable members, the question is that the Act to amend the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act, the Proceeds of Crime Act, the Finance Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago Act, the Customs Act, and the Exchange Control Act be restored to the order paper in the next session and that a committee be established to continue. No committee. All right, to be restored to the order paper in a new session. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against say no. I think the ayes have it. Leader of the House.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this House do now adjourn, sine die.
Honourable members, the question is that this House do now adjourn, sine die. All in favor say aye. Any against? The ayes have it. This house now stands adjourned. Signed day.